Hi everyone, my name is Denise and today I'll be talking about this book, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, Personal Writings. Okay, so just a brief about how this saint came into my life. I was a Catholic, I became a Catholic about 8 years ago after being a Protestant for many years. Okay, so I had received catechesis from this aged priest called Father Gerard Singh at Saint Ignatius Church in Singapore. So Saint Ignatius, which is who's the writer of this book, is also the founder of the Order of the Jesuits, and they're located at Saint Ignatius Church in Singapore. So after 1 year of receiving RCIA from the priest, Father Gerard Singh, I was baptized. And after the baptism, I realized that I was still lacking in knowledge. So I volunteered to be a catechist at the church, first for the secondary level, then for the primary level, and they sent me for lots of training, though not comprehensive enough to be a theologian, but just enough to teach the kids. So that's where also they taught a bit about Saint Ignatius and his daily Examen. So that's how I really got to know about him. But of course, I still watched a lot of videos on YouTube and bought a lot of spiritual books to read, so that I can really just learn more about the Catholic faith. Okay, so without further ado, I'm just going to read from a particular chapter. Okay, look. Okay, if you've got this exact book, it will be on page 192. The usefulness of poverty. To appreciate the true utility of poverty, how far it really has a place among the means suitable to gain our final end, one should reflect on the many sins from which we are preserved by holy poverty, since it does away with the stuff of which they are made. It slays pride, whom I'm guilty of, although I'm not rich. Okay, that's from me. Okay, now back to Saint Ignatius. That worm of the rich, and cuts out those infernal leeches of excess and gluttony, and of so many other sins. And should we fall through weakness, it helps us to get up quickly, because there is none of that amorous attachment which, like glue, binds the heart to the earth and to the things of the earth, and leaves no freedom to get up again, to come to one's senses and to turn to God. Poverty makes it easier in every case to hear better the voice, i.e. the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, removing any obstacles in its way. It also makes prayers more effective in the sight of God. The Lord heard the prayer of the poor. He speeds us along the way of the virtues, like a traveller relieved of every burden. He frees us of that slavery common to so many of the great of this world, in which all things obey or serve money. He fills with every virtue, if it is poverty in spirit, for the soul emptied of attachment to the things of earth will be that much fuller of God by reason of his gifts. Certainly, poverty cannot but be very rich, since it has been promised 100% gain even in this life. So here he's referring to a verse in the Bible where Jesus promised, even in this life, anyone who loses brother, who loses property, father, mother, or something like that, remember, in the Gospels, will be given 100-fold even in this life. Okay, back to Saint Ignatius. Although this promise is fulfilled in temporal matters only when expedient, it cannot but be true in spiritual matters. Thus they must needs be rich in divine gifts who voluntarily become poor in human things. Thus they must be rich in divine gifts who voluntarily become poor in human things. Thus they needs be rich in divine gifts who voluntarily become poor in human things. Okay, I really like that statement, the last sentence, so I read it 3 times. Okay, I can't say that I'm in that lot that voluntarily became poor for the Lord. I would believe that it's in part due to my lack of social skills. I'm not that likable at the workplace, perhaps, that I do not really have a very high paying job. I guess that would be a more adequate explanation. But over here we're talking about people who can actually earn lots of money. Like, for example, even Saint Ignatius himself, he was part of the Spanish nobles, so he had to give up a lot of wealth to become who he was. So those are those who voluntarily became poor for the Lord. So it is almost as if we are given a choice. This is your heart. You can either fill it up with your love for riches, or the love for God. And the more we relinquish our love for riches, the more it gives space for God to enter. I guess I'm quite comforted because in this passage he did mention about, like, even if one should fall through weakness, it helps us to get out quickly, because there is none of that amorous attachment which like glue binds the heart to the earth and to the things of the earth, and leave no freedom to get back up again. So it is really quite common. Okay, well, let me illustrate this with an example. An example would be like, I don't really like bags anymore. In my younger days, I did like beautiful bags, okay? But one day, maybe my sister came to my house and she brought a beautiful bag that's just the right color, right size, and I sort of got stirred. The need to have a beautiful bag came into my mind. Okay, this is a real example. It just happened a couple of weeks ago. And I started to go online to look up how much does that bag cost, what are its sisters or cousins, close replacements, and I realized I was very troubled. I was troubled because in part I felt guilty, you know, I'm not supposed to be superficial and all that. In part I was trying to rationalize that. I was like, it's important to follow the Lord, but at the same time have all these material needs met, at least in dignified way, right? So just buy the bag, and then in part, like, oh, my birthday is coming, I can use this excuse to buy that bag. But then, praise the Lord for this Saint Ignatius and all these verses from the saints. I realized that I don't really need that bag. I actually have existing ones that are still working. And if I really just like go down deep, like, why do I want that bag? First thing is, envy enters like through the eyes, right? You see something beautiful, you see someone having it, you are envious, and now you want to acquire that goods. So that's one thing. So when I get the bag, how am I really satisfied? I would feel like I can carry that bag out. When people see me carrying that bag, they think that I look good, right? And then what, they will like me more, and they think highly of me. They think that maybe I'm more well-to-do and I'm well-groomed, and then perhaps they'll treat me nicely, treat me with respect, and then perhaps I will suffer less. So eventually it is about avoiding suffering, which is not very virtuous, because a lot of things, like a lot of, like in Saint Teresa of Avila's words, right, a lot of treasures in heaven can only be gotten through suffering. So we have to be brave to face suffering. So in my bid to avoid suffering, I wanted to buy that bag. So okay, anyway, to cut the whole long story short, I didn't buy the bag. But after that, it was also a journey of self-awareness, because after that I got back up on my feet, and I thought that, oh, how weak I am, how easily tempted I am, and what a big sinner I am. I'm really far from being really I'm just like an infant stage in my journey to become a saint. I think, Lord, please don't let me die so quickly. Let me live a bit longer so that I can be fully purged on this earth. Okay, so enough about myself. Let's talk a bit about Saint Ignatius. Okay, so remember I told you just now he was a Spanish noble, but he was also involved in the war, and in one of those battles as a soldier, he broke his leg and he was stuck in bed, not so different from the bed behind me. So before that, he had a passion to read books on chivalry, which of course involves, like, I would call it modern day romance. He fantasized about going to some distant land and meeting some beautiful princess, rescuing her and doing kind acts to her. And when he thought about such things, he felt comforted. Oh, he had a rich imaginative life. He felt comforted, but then empty afterwards. So very fortunate, in the house that he was recovering on bed, immobilized, there were a lot of spiritual books for him to read. And when he started to ponder and to read the things of God, he felt that the peace continued to linger, even, and that the joy and the contentment, this wholeness, this kind of feeling starts to linger even long after he finished that contemplation. So okay, eventually that, after many years, that sort of evolved into his spiritual exercises. One of them that I really like is this idea about there's this spiritual exercise called the daily examen. So you do it at the end of the day or at the beginning of the next day, where you examine all the things that happened the day that just passed. So you categorize them to things that are consolations, things that bring you closer to God, and desolations, things that sort of bring you away from God. I use the word things, but actually what I'm referring to is events. So consolation would be, it is quite odd, because as I was doing this practice, Okay, to be honest, lately I haven't done that much, but in the past I would do it every single morning, a review of the day that passed, and I realized things that I thought would be a consolation turned out to be a desolation. Things that I thought was a desolation really was a consolation. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say I thought it was a consolation to be praised to the skies by a parental figure, someone like a boss or teacher, and I felt so good about myself, and it was boost my self-esteem, and I thought that would be a consolation. But upon deeper reflection using the daily examen, turned out to be a desolation, because I started to root my self-esteem on the praise that I've received. I draw away from God and start to feel proud and self-sufficient. So that was bad. Things like desolation could be like I had a big fight with my sister or my mother, or I found myself very irritable and I was behaving badly in public, and I was very embarrassed. But then when I pray and I'm in God's presence, He says, I still love you. It's okay, I still love you. And so the desolation sort of became a consolation, because it brought me closer, and it really just helped me deal with the pride that is separating me from God. So all this so-called suffering or uncomfortable events sort of turned out to be consolations. Okay, yeah. So do the daily examen. I think that is a great exercise. Okay, you can Google it, and there are very easy ways to do it. I'll spell it out. Daily, and examen is EXAMEN. It's created by this Saint Ignatius. Okay, you don't have to be a religious or a priest to do that. You don't have to be Catholic. You can be Protestant. You don't have to be Protestant. You don't have to be Christian. You just be a person. You can always do this exercise. But instead of thinking about God and say the things that I'm grateful for and the things that I'm not so grateful for, or in place of consolation is the things I'm grateful for. In place of desolation, the things I'm not so grateful for. That's how you sort of evolve it to suit the non-Christian crowd. Okay, so that's all for today. I highly recommend this book. It's a very good read. So it's a compilation of like, in the front part will be a lot about his stories, and behind like specific letters. Some are quite good because it depicts the spiritual exercises, and also some are letters. Because remember, Saint Ignatius, the Jesuits started to spread out. They are very big missionaries. So they, like Saint Francis Xavier, a good friend of Saint Ignatius, I think he was at India. So there were letters to him in this book. So you don't have to read it all. Sometimes you can just flip to one page and just pick up a passage and reflect on that. It's very powerful already. So I do recommend you get this book. I got it from Kinokuniya. You can buy it from Book Depository for probably half the price. And God bless.